A hero of Japan's Fukushima nuclear crisis has died of cancer aged 58. Masao Yoshida stayed at his post as manager of the plant when 3 of its reactors went into meltdown following the 2011 earthquake. He's said to have saved countless lives. DEPCO, the plant's operator, denies his illness was connected to his duties.
Why is Japan's population decreasing? Following decades of speculation about its aging population and low birth rate, Japan released an official census to show her decreasing population in 2015. Now, in 2018, the population seems to continue to decrease. A census in 2010 counted the population at 128 million. This figure is also Japan's peak population figure. It has never risen above this number. In 2015, the population was 127 million, making the country the 10th most populous country at the time. The latest count, according to warlometers.com, is 127,159,185. In 8 years, the population has shrunk by almost 1 million people. This is the first time in the country's history that the population has shrunk. Japan has one of the highest life expectancy rates in the world. Japan has one of the highest life expectancy rates in the world. If you are born in Japan, you can be expected to live to the ripe old age of 85 years, according to 2016 statistics. For a country to sustain growth, a birth rate of 2.1 is required, but Japan's birth rate stands at about 1.4. So why aren't Japanese people having children?
So, why do you think Japan's population is decreasing?
Are you serious? Are you serious, folks? It is getting dire. Situation is developing in Japan as it relates to Fukushima. According to a television report, the unprecedented catastrophe underway at Fukushima, the radioactive material will keep coming across to North America for centuries. Melted nuclear fuel to bleed into the ocean for decades, perhaps centuries. The entire Pacific is slowly being contaminated. Folks, never heard, here's a quote, never heard of so much sickness and death in such a short period, says a Fukushima evacuee. They write about strange diseases in young people, deadly tumors, hemorrhaging, pets missing hair, children losing all their fingernails. This is, the doctor said, my friends are dying of cancer one after another. And this is just 3.5 years after the terrible earthquake, the 5th largest earthquake in recorded history that hit Japan at 8.9. It shook Tokyo for 6 minutes. It brought a tsunami in 6 miles inland, and it left 6 nuclear reactors at Fukushima melting down. It moved the entire island of Japan 8 feet, according to the GPS, and knocked the earth off its axis 4.8 inches, shortening the days. Didn't Jesus say something about that? Shortening the days by 0.1666 seconds every day. Well, the government reports reveal that Fukushima's radioactive release, much larger than Chernobyl, Japan's reactors could have emitted nearly 4 times as much than Chernobyl. Japan TV anchor made this quote, "I couldn't tell the truth about Fukushima. Shocking revelations kept secret from the public. Nuclear scientists said, I have not trusted the information from the beginning. The worst scenario I predicted has happened." Fukushima nuclear waste detected off U.S. West Coast from California to Canada. There's definitely offshore Fukushima radiation now. Test results will be revealed to the public in several weeks from now. Canada's even feeling high concentrations of the Fukushima material. This is a tremendous impact all over the globe before it's said and done. Are we on the brink of a wormwood moment? Is this just the beginning?
Just give, this is much more important because everybody can become infertile in 1 generation.
I should say something about Fukushima and also Chernobyl, but certainly now Fukushima, and infertility. The truth is that infertility has been increasing in the world for the last 30 or 40 years, probably because of all the radionuclides that people are exposed to, originally from the weapons fallout, the global atmospheric testing, and then from Chernobyl, and now from Fukushima. And there are things that people there can do to try and minimize this. But the main thing is to get away from the radiation, because what they have to realize is that this is an invisible attack on the human race. It's something that will appear over the next 20, 30, 40 years, and its cause will not really be investigated. So I also predict, as a result of this ECRR model, that there will be significant increases in infertility in Japan as a result of this accident, and this is quite terrible. And in many ways it's more terrible than the cancer in adults, because it's destroying children who could have been born but now will not be born. And some of those who are going to be born, from our studies in the Middle East, will have horrifying deformities, and will obviously, in an advanced country like Japan, will be aborted clinically aborted before they get born, so that the birth rate will fall.
It's been more than 2.5 years since the Earth shook and the waves came. And like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, Fukushima became an infamous place name for nuclear cataclysm. It's been a huge and devastating drama, but it's fair to say it's been the defining story during my time here in Japan. I've been stunned by brazen and often clumsy efforts to cover up and lie about the effects and extent of the radioactive damage. But a company that was once regarded as a champion of industry is now denounced around here as a wrecker of homes and livelihoods, and a symbol of corporate greed and cover-ups. And as I prepare to head back in one last time before I leave this posting, it's abundantly clear many aspects of this epic unfolding tragedy are yet to be written. The nuclear fallout will see to that. Well, we've just crossed through the checkpoint into the nuclear no-go zone. That's the 20-kilometre exclusion area around the shattered Fukushima reactors. And we, like the people who used to live here, are only allowed in for 5 hours. That's because the radiation levels are still very high. A town that once thrived on the jobs and power of the nuclear plant next door is now a post-apocalyptic radioactive ghost town. Hoping some things won't be found. Some of the children here at Hirata Hospital weren't even born when the nuclear disaster erupted. But that doesn't mean they're out of harm's way. Who was born just a fortnight before the Fukushima reactors melted down, brought her kids in for yet another series of radiation tests. She's one of many parents worried about thyroid cancer. Her children have already been screened and cleared in tests run by the Fukushima local government. But a follow-up screening here at the private Hirata Hospital revealed cysts on the thyroid gland of 4-year-old Saki. Akira Suginoya knows not to jump to conclusions over links between the Fukushima radiation and thyroid cancer, but he's deeply concerned by what he's seeing. After all, he's a former thyroid specialist who spent 5 years operating on hundreds of Chernobyl children suffering from thyroid cancer. Now mayor of Matsumoto City, Akira Suginoya believes Japanese children won't fall victim to thyroid cancer to the same extent as Chernobyl, where 6,000 children were found to have contracted thyroid cancer. But there's clear evidence rates have risen. Before the disaster in 2011, the rate of thyroid cancer was between 1 and 2 cases in every million children. Now, with about 200,000 children screened so far in government-ordered tests, there have been 18 confirmed cases of thyroid cancer and 25 suspected cases, an unusually high rate. Other Chernobyl veterans, like Doctor of Internal Medicine Minoru Kamata, also believe the spike in cases should be thoroughly investigated. Not everyone is worried. Far from Fukushima, Professor Geraldine Thomas is a specialist in the molecular pathology of cancer at Imperial College London. She also helped establish the Chernobyl Tissue Bank, which analyses samples from people exposed to radiation after the nuclear disaster in Ukraine in 1986.
Following Fukushima, I doubt that there'll be any rise in thyroid cancers in Japan. This is simply because the amount of radioiodine that was released post-Fukushima was much, much less than released post-Chernobyl. Absolutely, if you look for a problem, especially if you use an incredibly sensitive technique, which is what the Japanese are actually doing, you will find something. You will find part of that problem. And you have to be careful you don't overinterpret that and worry people unnecessarily.
Professor Thomas believes that unnecessary worry and fear has driven parents to make unnecessary choices.
And even post-Fukushima, some women were having abortions because they were worried. The radiation would have done nothing to their prospective offspring, but the fear that that radiation was going to do something tipped them over into having an abortion, which nobody likes to know about.
Back at Hirata Private Hospital, another mother, Megumi Matsumoto, has brought her 2-year-old son Rui in for a thyroid screening.
検はまだ1回も通知も来てないので、自分でやるしかないっていうことで、ここで検査しています。
The critical point about thyroid cancer is that if it's detected early enough, it can almost always be treated successfully. So it's important the authorities are transparent, up front with parents like Megumi Matsumoto. They've been anything but candid. As so often has been the case as I've covered the Fukushima story, secrecy is the default position of the authorities. The Fukushima government refused our formal requests for age breakdowns and more detailed information concerning thyroid cancer victims since March 2011. When Fukushima's local governing authorities are not being accused of a cover-up, they're being accused of staging very visible, very expensive, and very elaborate exercises in futility. Across large open tracts of land and in isolated hotspots, heavy machinery is stripping topsoil in an effort to decontaminate the earth. Of course, it's an impossible task. This is largely a mountainous and heavily forested region, and no one knows precisely where the contamination ends. Kazuya Tarakawa grows organic rice, fruit and vegetables on a farm 60 kilometers from the nuclear plant. That's well beyond the no-go zone, and yet it's been declared a radiation hotspot. Tarakawa's family has cultivated this land for 8 generations, and when the radiation drama unfolded, he was running the place alongside his father. In the frenzy of panic and regulation that erupted around the crippled nuclear plant, Kazuya Tarakawa's father Hisashi was banned from taking his harvest to market. With financial pressure mounting, he slipped into a deep depression. The morning after being told by the authorities that he could no longer ship or sell his produce, Kazuya Tarakawa's father rose very early. He came out here to look at his crops and to survey his land. It was then he made a fateful decision. No sooner had Tarakawa buried his father than the ban on selling the farm's produce was lifted. When testing soon revealed other rice farms in his district had radioactive contamination above the government's safe limit, authorities continued to encourage Terakawa to keep growing and to keep selling. Terakawa says while his produce had contamination levels under the government limit, his conscience was still burning. He felt complicit in a cover-up and angrily confronted local government officials at a district meeting. The official advice to sell continues. Local consumers have no idea if the food they're buying, eating and feeding their children is ultimately toxic.